Hi, welcome to Writers Chat. I'm Caroline, and I'm here with Andrea today, who I'm usually here with, but we're here in a little bit of a different capacity because we are going to be talking about writing prompts, and especially writing prompts related to poetry. And since Andrea is our resident poetry expert, you will be our spotlight today, which I'm very excited about.
I'm honored to be on the other side of this kind of an episode. No, I'm just honored because of also how long we've known each other and doing these chats. I'm just honored to have you be the one to ask me questions and pick my brain and interview me on something
Absolutely.
that's different.
Well, it's really funny. I like poetry. I have always been somewhat terrified of poetry. And about a few years ago, I took a course at a writing workshop and with this guy, and he kind of opened me up to the world of poetry. And now I think it's also the coolest thing ever, but because I'm not a poetry writer, it's still I'm still in I still admire you very much for, kind of falling into poetry. So, I guess the biggest question or the first question that comes to mind for you is how, like, why, how did you fall into poetry? What pulled you in? What attracted you to it?
So it's funny you say that because this was never a thing for me. Like even in school, like the poetry that we had to read, like I remember in college or maybe in high school, it was not my thing, and it was confusing and overwhelming to read it. And I think like anything else where, you're just not in the right headspace to receive certain things. You're maybe not mature enough. Your brain's not developed, or just wrong time, wrong place kind of thing. My first dabble with it though, now that I think about it, because I always refer to the first poem that I really wrote that was more of feeling and more of something that I somewhat experienced. But before that I was in college, and I was part of it was called the Nimbus. It was like Wagner College I went to in New York, and it was called the Nimbus Literary Poetry Magazine. So you could contribute if you wanted to, as being part of the staff. You could be a writer, but you could also select what poems that students would just submit. So it was nice to be on that side of reading the poetry. And then I was able to submit, I think I submitted I don't know how many I submitted, but there was at least 2 that actually got accepted into the book. But those poems I enjoyed. It's the stuff that sometimes you have to read as like a curriculum. You're like, what the hell am I reading here? And when I think back on what I was reading then for Wagner, I could see where how my writing poetry makes that link. But it really started to be more present to it was 2003. Clear as day. I was working corporate, and it was just one of those days where nothing's happening, and God forbid they let you go outside your realm of what you do there to try to help. I was like, I'm just sitting here. I was a receptionist at the time, and this poem just started to come out of me. And I remember the title. I think it was called An Old Tower Remains, which is actually going to be in my book that I'm working on right now for next year to come out to be published. And it was just something that happened to me kind of growing up, and it just came out. And then other poems after that just started to develop. It was more for those who believe in past lives and reincarnation, I started to write things that I was seeing that may or may not have been things I once experienced in a past life, or songs that I would listen to that would trigger these memories. And it just started to come there. But then that was it. There was nothing. Years passed, no poetry, until I would say maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, just things that were happening in my life. I just needed a release. I needed to figure things out. It was becoming more of like therapy while I was working on other projects, other writing projects. And I just loved what this release was giving to me, even if I didn't get all the answers right away. It was just these worlds that were being created, whether it was stuff that did happen to me or just stuff that I was observing, or just stuff that was like kind of made up, but still comes from somewhere. But
Yeah,
yeah.
because your writing is definitely it's very easy and and very comfortable and very accessible. Where if I'm reading some of the poetry that you post on Instagram, especially for those of you who don't know, Andrea is, you can find her at Soul to Page on Instagram with a lot of her poetry and her prompts, which we'll get to in just a second. But yeah, it just feels very accessible and very friendly and very inviting. I think that that's the word, right? It's I read it and I understand it, and I don't need to work very hard to understand it, because I think that happens often with poetry, right? When we're reading poetry, the poetry that we get in school, as you mentioned, it's you have to work hard to break it down.
Yeah.
So I think that that's maybe the nice balance that you have, is that I don't have to work so hard. So do you read a lot of poetry? Of course, we'll recommend your book and your poetry first, but are there any poets that you are more drawn to, that you like to pick up?
Yes. And interesting you say that too, which I thank you again for what you said about my work. Because the poets that I do love, it's the same thing. There's not so much that you have to figure out. It's like you do and you don't. It's like a pleasant balance of, like anything else. Like I feel like poetry and even songs, like songs can be simple and sometimes they could be a little intricate, but someone could write a song or a poem and they know what it's about, but it's going to be interpreted differently by so many people. So I love that, like, there's that link there. So, for my poems too, I feel like the poems, the prompts, they are like these little snippets of stories that are just plucked from various things. So the poets that I love to read, that I feel do that as well. I'm just looking at my list because I don't want to leave anybody out, but Alicia Cook, I always mention her a lot in our chats, but I love her rawness. It's almost like she's with you going through things and you're like, oh my gosh, she went through the same thing as me, or that's how I would say it or see it, kind of like writing that she does. Very real, very raw. Young Pueblo, you may see him. He circulates on Instagram. A lot of people repost his stuff, but he's very like a motivational, inspirational poet. I like that side of things. Danielle Dobby, Becca Lee, I love their work too. Trev Saminsky, I just discovered him on TikTok actually. I don't even know how to put it to words. Even the way he reads his poetry, it just takes you there. Like he could write about a pen, literally a pen, and the pen's feelings and emotions, but you can follow it, but it blows your mind because he just gives it a story. He gives everything a story in his poems, that it's just things that I hope that that's what people get from my writing, but in my own way. Not that I'm trying to do what anybody else is doing, but like, it's just that nice, like, the connection, like your fellow writers that are like trying to tell these stories through the poems. I love it.
Well, that's how writing works, right? In order to be a better writer, and it doesn't matter across all genres, you need to read, you need to know, and you need to know what you like and maybe even more importantly, what you don't like. And on that note, when do you feel, I know you've touched on it a little bit, but when do you feel compelled to write? Like when does it like sort of flow out of you? Is there something that sort of triggers that for you?
So, especially when writing, well, it's so crazy. When writing my book, I I would write poems on the bus when I used to go to work in Manhattan. And there's one poem in particular that stands out to me and like those like interesting moments of when you write. So I was literally on the bus and I was watching this little girl skip around with her dad. And it just sparked like this whole like purity, innocent, like simplistic things in life. And I just started to draw from what that looked like. And it's actually titled We Forgot How to Skip. So it's just like moments in time like that when I'm just observing other people. And it could be like I could be just coming back from a walk, or like I said, on a public transportation thing, or just in my house, in my office, like anything that I feel like I have to just let this out, it just comes. When I do the prompts, this is what like blows my mind because I've done so far like spring prompts and Halloween prompts, and I'll just like sit down and just like it just comes like all these like words just start coming out, and I'll have a ton of them, and I'll just like filter through like what needs to come out most. But like I think and I've mentioned on here too, like I'm also an angel card reader and I connect with the angelic realms, so I feel like a lot of the channeling also comes like the inspiration, like where does it happen, when does it happen, comes from this channeled inspiration from my guides to help me get it out there as well.
Yeah, I love, I think my favorite, I know that you're passionate about Halloween, but I think my favorite prompts were the ones that you did this past April, that spring list. I thought it was really great. I really like the words that you chose because they were so open, and so sort of so inviting and so easy to follow, where I bet that you had some really interesting responses from people. So but I do want to get into that a little bit more. So like how do you think of these words? Where, what sort of inspires you to which words to use, which words that maybe, or is it there ever a time where maybe a word you think, oh yeah, this will be great, and then once you start thinking about it, it's not what you were thinking, or it takes you in a completely different direction?
Yes. So when I did the spring one, that was my first time doing it. Alicia Cook did her own spring props that I participated in hers. So the year after, I was like, you know what? I want to do my own. And what I did was differently, though. I wanted to take spring and put it into phases. It was just something that came to me. So it was like this whole like spring renewal and growth and budding kind of phase. But like, what does that look like? And like in all the different the titles that came about, I just wanted to try to follow that progression. And sometimes, yeah, I will post. Yes, these are the poems, and people can join in too. I always like make people like make it open that they could write their own, even if they don't want to post it, if they want to keep it to themselves, or if they do post it, they tag me, I'll share it for them. But I'll sometimes change the title. Like it could be like, I think the spring ones I do a full month. So it could be like maybe the third weekend. I'm like, no, I don't like this isn't calling to me. So I will adjust it. Even like the Halloween one too. Like I sometimes adjust, what the theme I want it to be, because it's like you can't ignore it. You just have to like listen to like what's flowing and what's not. But yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
No, the spring ones I love because it made me think a little bit of, you mentioned earlier that the idea of songs and music, because of course that is poetry as well. It's just different.
Right.
But that one reminded me a little bit of Vivaldi and spring, and that idea of the renewal and the change, because spring isn't just one moment. Spring has it snows in the spring, right? So
this is true, and it sometimes is very hot out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. So I really like that, and I really do like your approach to that. And so, I guess, what inspired you to start doing the prompts? I mean, I know you mentioned Alicia with her poetry, but what sort of how are you finding the responses from people? And
well, I wanted to do the prompts because I just wanted to get more involved with my community that's on my page. And I wanted them to get to know kind of like what they'll experience in some way with my book. And I just wanted to give back. I wanted to give back something fun, inspirational. And I just wanted to dive deeper into, it's like a challenge, because poetry prompts are not like a book where you're sitting for years sometimes with your material and you have time to edit it and sit with it, leave it, come back. Like, prompts are raw. Like, you're writing it that day, or you're posting. Like, for me, like, I make sure I write it that day and I post it that night, or sometimes the next day. But you're so vulnerable, and it's like, I love that rawness, vulnerable of, if you're not used to just submitting something as writers like that quickly, you're just out there. Like, there could be not grammar mistakes, but like, it may not flow. Like, sometimes I'll look back on the prompts and I'm like, oh yeah, this, I want to like, I have to fix this, this could go another way. But I just love like that instant, you're trusting the moment of the rawness and the vulnerability. And then in that instant, it connects with someone else. Like, the ones I did for Halloween, there was one that two people in particular liked the same poem, but they all felt something different from it. Like, I wrote it from a different place and they were feeling something else. So, I'm not going to tell them, no, that's the wrong interpretation. Like, you don't do that, obviously. But it's amazing to see, like, this is what healed me, even though it's a Halloween prompt. Like, I made it very different this time too. It's more like the one I did last year was very childlike, inner child prompt. This was more like a more mature way of exploring Halloween prompts. But it was interesting to see how they were healing from it in a different way than what I was healing from this prompt. So I love that.
So here's the question. And I mean, this is a tough one, I think. So of course, when you're writing, there's the argument that you're never really done, because you could come back to your book 10 years later and still, be wondering what you were thinking when you wrote something. But how do you know that you're done?
Oh my God. It's so, oh my goodness. And you know what, as you ask that, and as I think about that, there's so much freedom in that, even though it sometimes be very scary and anxiety driven, but maybe it's good that it's not done, because you can go back to it. But I think there are moments when you do know, like, there are just like even certain poems in my book where I'm like, no, I know I'm done. I don't have to revisit this anymore. It's just like a certain level of ease. I know that personally, I feel that I'm like, no, this is good. Okay. But a lot of my prompts, I feel like there's something that I can do with this. Like, I could go back and maybe redo the whole thing or add to it. Like, there's like, because sometimes I can feel like this could go a little bit longer. Like, as I like to do, I could write 3 sentences for a poem and I feel like that's good. And then I'll do 2 pages for a poem. But the ones that I've been doing, some of them I feel like, oh, I think I cut this off a little too soon. I want to see where this could go. So I think there's definitely freedom in it when you know that it's okay if, it's not completely done yet.
I know, that was a tough question.
It was a tough one.
And then do you feel like these prompts could go further and become something else, maybe like a different, I don't know, a book of like free writing or something, or a journal? Have you ever thought that way?
I noticed more recently with the prompts I've been doing that I would love to turn these into like different books and theme them differently. Like, why not have a Halloween, poetry book? I've done, like, this is the second time around I've done it. So why not that? Or maybe turn it into, like you said, it's a journal, and like one of the poems is on one of the pages and you can reflect on what this poem is doing for you. Maybe like a calendar or something, or like even like printing certain poems that people can frame. Like, there's some poets that I follow too that I've noticed they do that, and I thought that is such an amazing idea, because you can just take that one piece that stood with you and just always look at it. You don't have to just open the book and like, even if you earmarked it, but still, like, it's there, it's on your desk in your office or something, or in your bedroom. It's just like, it's there for you. So I definitely want to not just ground it into a book. Like I definitely want to play and see like what are the ways we can get it out there.
So you've given us some sneak peeks into this book, but I'm kind of wondering, is there a release date? Which, not to stress you out about it. And is there, and maybe is there anything else you can tell us about it? Because, I'm very excited to see it.
Well, thank you. I always love your support and encouragement because as we know, as writers, it's so many things are popping up in your life, in your day, and you have all the intentions to get this book done, and you set these dates, and then sometimes it still doesn't happen. So I intend to get this done in spring of next year, 2023. So I'm hoping by March, if not, definitely by May. Like that's my window there. And definitely looking into possibly doing it all on my own, like formatting it, which is something that partly scares me. But I'm willing to take that challenge and just really make it my own by really taking the reins and having a lot of say in what goes on with the book. But the book is called And Everything in Between. It used to be so much longer, but I have definitely shortened that title and it feels right. So like you said before, like, how do you know when something's done? And I'm like, this just was like instant. I'm like, this is the right title for this book. So that I know doesn't have to be changed. So I'm in the, thank you. You'll see like the book is in 3 sections. There's different themed poems. And you'll see some of the title is in these other sections. I wanted to originally make the book be, but this book is basically helping you get back to yourself, like recentering yourself in all these different areas of your life. So it's what I've learned so far about how to navigate things that have happened in my life through different areas. So it's love, it's work, it's just life itself. And I'm hoping that the way other poets have helped me figure things out, like what I figured out so far, that sheds light for other people on how to navigate the things that are happening to them. But I love it because not everything has answers, and I'm fine with that. Like a lot of things are just working through the process. Some of it has like past life tones in there as well. I'm definitely someone who believes in that. So it's like the stories that I've seen myself possibly partaking in, or just stories that I've seen in others. But I feel like it's definitely like a give back book. Like I want to put out there my take on life and how I've helped myself get through certain things. And even if I don't, again, like I said, I don't have all the answers to it, but you feel good. Like you're still good with where you stand in everything. So, so my friend who's a photographer, we did a photo shoot for this book. So I also will have some photos in there too that I feel is like a visual representation of some of the poems that will like break up the sections in the book too. So I'm excited about that.
That's wonderful. That sounds beautiful. So if people want to, of course, at Soul to Page, your Instagram, if people want to find your poetry elsewhere or some of the other things, or even connect with you, what's the best way they can do that?
So if people can visit me on my website, it's AndreaRFreeman.com, and I have like all my contact information there. I'm also on medium.com, which I have links in my website, which I want to start also putting my poetry there as well. So yeah, you could definitely find me in those areas. I have on my website a link to if anybody wants to sign up for my mailing list so they can stay more up to date that way. And I'll send them emails about what's going on to get everybody in the know of what's going to be happening going forward.
That's wonderful. I mean, thank you so much for talking to us about this today. I think we should do more poetry talks.
Yes, I would love to.
I think there's a lot to learn. But yeah, absolutely. So again, AndreaFreeman.com. That's right. That's your website. And, sign up to Andrea's mailing list so you can get more of her poetry and be the first to know when her book comes out.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having this time with me. I loved like exploring and talking about, you know, the world of poetry, and then seeing, you know, your take on it too. It's something new for you to talk about, which is
yeah, no, it's wonderful. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.